What's going on, guys? So today let's do a tier list of the leader abilities currently in Heroes of Middle-earth and where I rank each and every one of them. Let's dive into it. Alright guys, so I thought today's video would be a fun one to do a tier list. I haven't really done one of these, but there's a lot of fun different tier buckets we can do in this game, whether it be your top 10, this, that, or the other thing, right? But for today's video, I thought it'd be fun to break down the leadership abilities that are currently in the game for all, I think it's 17 characters, and where I put them in a S, A, B, C, D tier ranking. And spoiler, there's not really like super terrible leader abilities, but there is one that's going to fall in that bottom bucket. So let's dive into it. So just going in order alphabetically, and not by, of course, rank where they're going to land here. The first up is Alreda the Chieftain. So this one's a tough one because it's a Dunlin character, and not a lot of people have Dunlin built out, if really anybody has Dunlin built out. And it's a team that I'd love to honestly try, because I kind of like that the way their kits work. It feels like a Fury Warrior kind of design, you know, where it's that Blood Frenzy ability, which probably a lot of you guys don't even know what that is because no one's using this character. But essentially you gain a stack that can stack up to 10 times that gives you lifesteal and focus, right? So this specific leadership ability affects Shadow Squad members when they die, and then all Dunlending squad gain a stack, right? 40% lifesteal is actually kind of nuts. I mean, it is, right? Like 40% lifesteal is a lot. And you get additional per stack of Blood Frenzy, so up to 50%. And then focus is always just like a really nice to have stat. So getting the +5 focus is a little bit weak, but you get +1 focus per stack, stacking up to also 10 times. So I would say this character's kit's not really that bad. It's just no one's using the Dunlin, so like nobody really uses it. It also is impacted because there's only 3 Dunlin characters in the game, so that doesn't really help all that much. And then I would say that this is a character that you probably really need to push max, right? Like I think like ability level 6 here is pretty important, because one of the biggest gains you're getting out of these is going to be the lifesteal. So you really want that like +10 on that 5th and 6th level. So it's a little bit of a an investment as well. So I would say Alreda for me feels like it could actually be like a low B. Like if you had a full Dunlin squad, feels pretty good. You get them all kind of just slapping and just getting all that lifesteal. Maybe even build them with some lifesteal if they ever buff it. So you just get like lifesteal passively plus built into their kits because of the glyphs. Like it could be pretty good. But let's go to Bifur. Bifur is great. He's probably a top 5 leader in the game, in my opinion. Very defensive and very good synergies, obviously, with his dwarf group. Counterattack is strong, right? Like anytime that you can have something with might and defensive and counterattack. The other one's really underrated here is giving any squad member, whether it's dwarves or not, plus 15% resistance. Like it's really good, especially in the raids. So I would put Bifur as a very strong leader ability. I would also say he's probably one where you really want to push this character to ability level 6. Getting that additional stack of counterattack is pretty nice. So I would say that this is another pretty big investment character, whereas some of the other ones on this list you can probably leave at like 4 and still get a lot of value. But Bifur by far has one of like, I would consider a top 5 leadership ability in the game. So I would easily put him at like a high A, low S. We'll put him at A for now. Let's go to Bolg. Bolg's another kind of sleeper character. Not to say his kit's insane or anything, but he's just another one of those that not everyone's diving into because not everyone's really building out this squad, because Misty Mountain's it's not really one of those squads that a lot of people have built out at this point in the game, right? So if we're looking at his kit, again, it's Orc, Trolls, or Misty Mountain. So very, very open in the sense of like you can kind of build out a team of like really a lot of shadow characters and have him as lead, and his leadership ability sort of still works. It's not specific to anything, you know, it's really open, right? Like it's good for a lot of shadow characters to take advantage of it. And the big thing with his is, again, you get the advantage. And if the character's below 50% health, it's 100%, right? So pretty good. And then again, Orc, Troll, Misty Mountain, which is kind of covering a lot of your shadow characters, you're getting that plus 15% resistance, which is a nice to have, again, in raids or just in general. The big problem with him is going to be he's a challenge shop character. So given that Tibeb and Halbarad are probably going to supersede Bolg, he's just not a character that a lot of people are going to really go deep into investing in. Now, the upside is his ability. You probably can get away with him not being up to level 6. I would say 5 is still pretty nice here because you get that extra advantage percent of 10, but getting that extra 5% resist at level 6, sure, it's a really nice to have, but I wouldn't say that like makes or breaks his leadership ability. So you could probably put him at like level 5 and save a little bit of your resources on those epic materials, since they're, you know, they're hard to come by. Bolg, I would probably put his ability low B. Is he low B? High C, low B? He's definitely somewhere here. Let's put him low B for now. Might be too generous, but we'll put him low B for now. Denethor. So he's the Gondor guy, right? Very, very specific, right? Gondor only. So you can only use them with the Gondor team. There's no value of any random allies on your team that just get some secondary passive. There's not light team. There's not, it's just Gondor. So you have the Gondor 5, and that until they add more characters, but for now the Gondor 5, and that's where his ability is going to come into play. So very defensive, right? You get block chance, and then you get immunity. So he's very good at sustain for his team, which is really cool. I would also say he's probably one that you don't have to go deep into the ability levels. You can probably stop at maybe 4 if you want to save the ability, like the epic materials, and still get pretty good value. You're losing 5% block chance, which, you know, is like half of the block chance that you would get otherwise, but still getting 5% block chance on all living Gondor members means you're getting what? So if you got 5% for each living Gondor member, and you have 5 of them alive when anything starts, you got 25% block chance, which is pretty good. And when they block, they gain immunity. And again, if you put it to level 6, you're getting 50% block chance. So very strong leadership ability from like a defensive standpoint, but I would say it's just not that great. I mean, you're limited to Gondor and only Gondor, and it's just a block chance. The immunity is great. It's definitely going to help you in probably some of the raids, but I would say it's too specific to be like a game-changing leadership in comparison to some of the other ones in the game. So for me, it's definitely not one of the stronger ones. I probably put him in a C level category, my opinion. Gandalf. Not a lot of people have him, including myself, but Gandalf has an awesome, open-minded leadership ability, right? So you get 20% max health to all fellowship members. And then he has like one of the coolest kind of specials, I guess, if you want to call it that, within his kit for his leadership, which is the Istari's Gift, which is essentially giving like a buff to a random team member that then calls him in for an assist when somebody else is attacking on your team. So you're getting kind of like those constant like assist abilities, which is kind of a neat concept. And then on their turn for fellowship, they all get healed 7% of their max health. So he's like a very, very strong support character that gives your fellowship members insane value from like a health perspective, right? So Gimli's just already tanky as it gets, and he's just getting all this additional health and then healing. Like, I think his leadership, even just the Istari's Gift, which doesn't require fellowship, is a really nice plug and play leadership ability to put on really any team. But of course, playing him with the fellowship is just great, because that 20% health plus the 7% healing is nice. Very, very, very nice. I would say he's a full ability material level 6 to get all the passives kind of built in. But if you were only playing him to really just be like a plug and play flex onto a team, even if you just got level 1 to get the Istari's Gift going, right? Like, that's good enough. It's just if you built him up for Fellowship, you kind of want the full kit. I think Gandalf's is very strong. It's better than Bifur's, though. Oof. Could be. Is it better than Bifur's? I'm going to say it's better than Bifur's. We'll go with that. Halbarad. Halbachad, as some people say. I know when the game came out, Halbarad was considered like one of the best characters, if not the best character in the game. When I started playing in August, Halbarad was already kind of seeing his true self, which was like a very, very, very good character, but a very hard to farm character. And people kind of then decided like it's just not worth the currency to go after him anymore. So people started saying that it was worth instead going after like the materials in the shop, you know, and using those resources instead of using them towards character shards, because it just wasn't worth, you know, the amount that you got. And then they did like that kind of fix for Challenge Shop, like phase 1 fix. But now with Tibeb in there, and a lot of people kind of want the Haradrim team, he's sort of like, you know, falling down the list a little bit. So I'd be curious. He's definitely somebody like I'd love to have, because him being like kind of that tank healer paladin kind of character is really neat. But the problem is Rangers just aren't really like a team of themselves, because they sort of have a bunch of characters that go into a bunch of other different teams, like the Elves with the Rivendell, Strider with the Road to Rivendell. So like they don't really have a full-fledged like, man, you gotta run the Rangers, because then you're taking them from like the other really strong teams. So that's a little bit of a reason why the Ranger in general is not that great. But his kit is pretty cool with the focus and then the Eagle Eye, which is when attacks cannot be missed or blocked. And then you also get turn meter. Like, his kit is kind of neat. It makes him very offensive, but even if you did do a full Ranger team and it was worth building a Ranger team and they came out with more characters that were kind of worth having as a Ranger team, the focus plus the Eagle Eye, like, it's good, but it's not great. And again, it's very like, you only can play this with Rangers. So I think that puts a little bit of a knock on how strong the leadership ability is. I also think that if you were going to go this route, like, you really need to go all in on it, because of the whole kit's built around that Eagle Eye turn meter focus. So you really need like the full like level 6 on this character. So that also kind of knocks him a little bit too, because you don't get as much value for only spending like, you know, maybe to like ability level 4. So for me, Halbarad's probably on the same tier as like Denethor, maybe slightly better than Denethor. But he's certainly not like anything probably higher than like a high C, low B. Lady Eowyn. So we mentioned in spoiler that there was one character on here that was probably going to fall in the D tier, and we found her. So probably not to a surprise to many. Her kit kind of sucks. It's borderline useless in some degree, in my opinion. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments below if you think differently, but it's very basic. Rohan, so you're limited to the Rohan team, which most only play the core 3, not even like the full Rohan squad. And you get 45% when fully built out crit chance, so no additional damage, just crit chance, but only for assists and counterattacks, which not even all the Rohan can do assists and counterattacks. So that kind of sucks. Now, if you got 45% crit chance passively for the Rohan team, that would probably be kind of insane, right? Half the time critting more often every attack, whether it be your attack or an assisted attack or a counter attack, kind of a lot of damage being put out there. But because it's only on assist and counter attacks and it's only Rohan, it's kind of bad. I think it needs more to be useful, because this just is not it. So for me, easy D tier, just not good. Legolas, his is actually pretty good. Again, it's elf specific, but elves are pretty widespread. You're not just Rivendell, right? So all elves. So there's a lot of characters you can kind of build in with this kit. And elves are generally fast and hard hitting, right? And his kit is pretty cool. It's the deadly, which is like a 30% crit chance, right? So anytime an elf evades, which kind of happens quite frequently, you get 2 turns of deadly, so your crit chance is increased, which is great, because then they just hit harder. And when they do crit, they have a 70% chance to increase your speed by 30%, so they're already fast going, and now they're just faster. So it's kind of like a cool ability that doesn't really like pull you into a specific something. It's just like, hey, strong offensive elf team led by Legolas is going to give you a lot more damage. That's kind of what this does, and it does it pretty well. And I would say you can probably get away with this at ability level 5, because then you always gain deadly, which is like pretty important for this. But getting that +1 duration of deadly is huge, because then you're just getting that 2-turn additional crit chance. So I would say you probably really want this one fully built out. But it's pretty flexible. You can use it on a lot of teams. So I would say his kit definitely can work with works well. I would say this is definitely A tier. I'm just trying to debate where on the A tier list. I'd say it's yeah, I'd say it's probably a little bit worse than Bifur's, but certainly A tier. Lord Balin. We know how much I love him. We know how good his kit is in general, but specifically his kit here for his leadership is just great. So not only does it, because of Balin's expedition, he has Balin's expedition that he impacts, dwarfs that he impacts, and elves. So it's pretty cool because it kind of covers like a lot of light squad, like the light side. So you can kind of flex him in on a lot of teams. And what it does is great too, because it kind of gives that specific faction or race, whatever you want to call it, what they're kind of missing, right? Like dwarves are very like kind of tanky characters, generally speaking, you know? And then elves are very like fast, kind of nimble characters. And then dwarves, when they're inflicted with the Bane, they get Eagle Eye, which is their attacks can't be Mr. Block. So that's kind of like a nice, like giving them a little bit of like one of their weaker kind of kit pieces that dwarves probably have in general, like just speaking aloud, not a specific dwarf here. And then on the flip side, elves, they gain protection, which again, they're normally like more nimble, kind of like light wearers, taking a little bit more damage, but they do a lot of damage. They gain 50% armor increase. So they're not like a heavy armor class, but they're getting a ton of additional armor for survivability. So like, I like how his kit gives the dwarfs and elves sort of like their opposite kind of needs, which is neat. And then if you're Balin's expedition, you just get both effects, which is amazing. And why like Rumil and Orphan are really like kind of exciting characters when they become free to play. And then dwarf and elf members in general, and this is like another sleeper kind of just extra passive on a leadership ability, is going to be that plus 20% armor. Like that for any character the whole time is so much armor. So this guy here, Lord Balin, is honestly easy S tier leadership ability, and definitely one you can take to level 6 because it's pretty much kind of needed if you want to get that always eagle eye protection. So he's certainly somebody you're going to want to take to max here, but never worry about wasting materials on this guy because he's one of the best, top 3 easily for leadership abilities. Lord Elrond, won't spend much time on him because everybody knows who Lord Elrond is and what he does and why he's so good, but long story short, of course, he's another elf and Rivendell focused leadership, but he also just passively gives any light squad member plus 10% max HP, which, I mean, that alone is just like a great plug and play feature, but you're usually not plug and playing Lord Elrond. You're going to work with him within the Rivendell team because he does such a nice job with, if there are no Banes, you extend their boons and you give them fortitude, and then you give elves plus 4% damage per boon on them up to 20%. So not only are you extending boons to give them more buffs, not only are you giving them fortitude, which is going to give them 50% increased resistance, but you're also giving them 20% up to 20% additional damage and 10% health. Like definitely the best kit in the game for leadership, easily. And he's another one. Do not fear. Ability materials all the way to level 6 is kind of a must, and it'll never be a waste of resources. He is somebody that when you get epic materials, and if you got them here just a few days ago from the January 7-day event, I would spend them immediately on Elrond if you haven't already. Lord Balin would be a very good number 2 to consider using your resources on. Shagrat. Another one of those characters that I don't think anyone really has kind of fully built out. I think it was one of those characters, again, in the early game. If you were playing, you may have started building him because he was considered a strong character. Not to say he's not good anymore, but just nobody really has Mordor. So unfortunately, that kind of just hinders him. See a lot of usage. But his kit is kind of interesting. So it is pretty flexible because, you know, it is kind of locked to Mordor, but even with that, like it's an interesting kit, right? So anytime when attacking a target with a Bane, so somebody who has a debuff on them, right? And I apologize if I use buffs and debuffs. It's boons and banes. I mean, it's the same thing, right? It's just I'm just used to buffs and debuffs as kind of like what they're called, right? You gain 4% turn meter per Bane on a target up to 8%. And if it's a Mordor, so again, that's the flexibility side of it. It doesn't have to be a Mordor character. It can be any character can get up to 8% turn meter. But if they're a Mordor character, right, you're getting double that. You're getting 16%. I don't know if 16% is enough to really drive a character into being very useful. As like, man, you gotta have this kit built out. I really want to use my resources into him. So I would definitely say he's on the lower end. I wouldn't say he's like Lady Eowyn level, but I wouldn't say that 16% turn meter is like a game-changing leadership ability. It's good, but it's not something that I think it's gonna really like, man, I have to get this thing, right? So that's a little tough. And if you're really going for like the full Mordor build, you probably want to take this the full distance to get that 16%, but maybe you can stop at 4 and you're still getting 12%. I mean, it's not bad. But yeah, I would say that Shagrat's probably like high D low, like C minus easily. So we're gonna put him C minus. Strider's very good. You get him for free anyways. You're probably building him out to some degree because you had him since day one. And it's just so good with LotR. So anytime Strider crits, grants stealth for 1 turn for the most wounded Hobbit. So that's great because he's gonna crit if you build him. And the Hobbits already have a lot of stealth kind of builds like synergies and is super helpful to kind of keeping them alive. Anytime I play Road to Rivendell in PvP, they're not like a hard team to beat, but they're frustrating as hell when you're trying to like finish off a Frodo who just keeps stealthing, you know, and you just can't attack him. Or whoever, right? Like any of those guys, they just constantly stealthing and you just can't fight him anymore. Or like a Pippin, you're trying to just finish off before he gets that next mushroom heal off and then you just can't attack him for 2-3 turns because he's stealth. Drives me nuts. But you get like the really nice Hobbit synergy, which you're generally playing with the Road to Rivendell anyways. And then Road to Rivendell specifically, you're getting just a passive 15% damage buff and a passive 10% armor buff. And you can probably see the consistencies here. The leadership abilities end up being very, very high on this list is because they generally have like 2 levels of leadership kind of perks. And it's one that's like more specific to a team build. But then like a second one that it might be like team specific, like Gondor, Road to Rivendell, whatever. But you're getting this like just passive blanketed increase in stats, whether it's focus or damage or armor or resistance. Like having that just flatlined add to characters is great value. So anytime you see that like next level of leadership abilities on a character, it almost like just bumps them into like the next tier immediately because you're getting just value, which anytime you're building these out, you kind of want the value. The other thing is you can really get away with this without being like really built out. Like I think even you just got this to level 3, which most people are going to tell you like you should just get every character more or less to 4 across the board because it doesn't cost that much resources, just 25 rares ability materials and then, you know, no epics. But even if you took this to 3, like you're getting a lot of those built-in passives that you're looking for. You're just missing out on that additional damage and armor, which yeah, it hurts, but you're still getting value from just taking him from to level 3 here. So I'd say Strider's is really strong. I might put him maybe like just above Legolas as an A tier. Feels right to me. All right, we're closing in the last couple here. So the Great Goblin. So goblins, specifically the Great Goblin, right? His is pretty basic, but it's very good. It's goblin only, but every time they die, and we know they die and come back with like a little shitter character alongside, you got to finish off another version of the goblin. They gain stacks of Goblin Flurry. And what Goblin Flurry is is you get 5% damage and focus per stack, up to 8 stacks. And each level is giving you additional stacks to that Goblin's Fury. So you don't even have to take this to max, because if you have 5 on your team, granted you don't want your whole team to die, but if you have 5 on your team, say 3 of like the real characters died and like 3 of like the little respawn characters died, that would be 6, and that feels pretty good, right? So you can probably take this to like ability level 4 and still feel the value of this leadership ability. And it's very good, because if you have 6 stacks of Goblin's Fury, you've got what, 30% damage and 30% focus for your team. Like, it's pretty good. That's when they start to really slap, and that's why they start to do pretty well in some of the chapters in the raid, because of all these built up stacks of Goblin's Fury that they can get. So I would say Great Goblin's leadership ability, even though it's very basic, one-liner, like just kind of, this is what it does and that's it, and generally for me that kind of like knocks him down the list, I would say he probably still falls into like a mid B. I feel like it's pretty good. It's not great, but it's definitely really, it's pretty good for the Goblin team. Thorin. So Thorin is good, right? I mean, he's a legendary. You kind of expect that his leadership ability is going to be pretty good, and it certainly is. I mean, it's up there with the Balins and the Lord Elronds, right? Like, it's just a strong leadership ability. So every time a member attacks the same enemy, you gain stacks of Overwhelmed, which then gives additional damage stacks, right? Up to 10 stacks. So you can really scale this up and do crazy amount of damage if you're attacking the same target. So obviously in Rage, if you're attacking just the boss, like on chapters 2 and 4, doing a nice job, right? Sometimes they resist, sometimes they fall off, whatever. But if you're in PvP and you're kind of like want to focus in on that one guy, like you can get crazy amount of stacks on them. So his is really good, but it's very specific, because as soon as you attack anything else, you lose those stacks. So that's a little bit of the downfall. But again, it's an awesome kind of design with like the single target, keep hitting the same guy to get those stacks built up and really start pumping the damage. And then on top of that, when an enemy with Overwhelmed dies, your Thorin's Company squads gain a 10% turn meter, and they get healed for 10% of their health, which is like a nice, you know, additional attacks happening. You're kind of recovering some health. And then again, one of those one-liners that I've talked about here already about just making these guys even that much stronger for their leadership abilities is all Thorin member company get 20% focus and 20% additional health. So his kit's great. Like, his leadership ability is very, very good. I mean, it's like Lord Elrond level good, right? I would say that you probably want to get this built out to max to get that additional healing and turn meter, etc. I think you still get a lot of value at just level 4, because you're kind of just missing out on those like additional, like, you know, secondary tier here of focus and health benefits, whereas you're still getting all those overwhelmed stacks and such. So 6 is where I would go, but you can still really get a lot of value by taking him to ability level 4. Thorin, yeah, I mean, he's up here. Yeah, easily up here. Last two, Tibeb. So Tibeb is a little bit controversial, because his ability, in my opinion, is like a really cool, well-designed idea. The problem is his ability relies on his entire team being fully built out. And that's why Haradrim is one of those teams where you start to see a lot of success as your team is like gear tier 9, level 60, you know, level like 7 stars, you know, as strong as they can be across the whole team, because his is a passive that says each living Haradrim squad member shares their passive ability with their other Haradrim squad members. And then again, you get that passive of the 10% damage and the 15% block chance, which is amazing. But because the way his works with the passives being shared amongst the team, you kind of need all of their kits built out too to get all the benefits of those passives shared amongst the entire Haradrim team. So it's a big investment, but it's a really cool concept, right? Like that you get to have this whole passive sharing ability. And the cool thing is if you don't really want any of the other stuff from his kit, you can kind of just get it to level 1 and you're getting what the majority of what his thing does, which is the passive sharing kind of concept. Obviously, if you want to really build out the team, you're going to take his stuff all the way to the top. But even if you just literally dinged the first ability, like level 1 unlocked it, I mean, you're getting kind of what the entire kit does without like the plus damage and block chance. So kind of a cheap investment for his actual leadership ability, but it requires the entire rest of your team to be well built. So that puts him a little bit of a ding. So I would probably say he's like, in my opinion, an A tier level leadership ability when fully built out Haradrim. But if he's not fully built out, yeah, it definitely drops down because he just doesn't quite have what he needs. And then last up is our buddy Ugluk. A lot of people have Ugluk because you kind of get him right away early on in the game for the Isengard group. And honestly, I really like his leadership ability. I think it's pretty strong. It's Isengard specific, so you're going to use him with the Isengard team. But every time a squad member inflicts a Bane, you heal all members for 2.5% of their max health. So he's doing a lot of healing for your team because they don't have like a really great like single healer, right? For their teams, that's their survivability is a little bit in check. But if you build this guy out, Ugluk, and you kind of max out his abilities, really, really good. I think it's solid. You get that plus health, you get that plus focus, and you get that regeneration for every time a Bane is sort of inflicted, right? And it's any Isengard member, so not even Ugluk inflicting it, but anyone inflicting a Bane. And they do a lot of Bane, so like you're getting a lot of some sustain happening throughout a fight because of his leadership ability. So I would actually say Ugluk's is quite good, probably somewhere in A tier. Probably can mix and match like Strider, Ugluk, and Legolas here, but this feels good. Looking at it now as everyone's kind of plopped onto the board, maybe Shagrat could slide down, but I'll leave him at low C. But I like where this landed. I think this is a pretty good tier. I kind of like where we ended up with all 17 current leadership abilities in the game. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think this list makes sense? Do you think anyone here is too high or too low? I like to hear you guys' comments in the down below. So let me know. Hopefully this video was kind of fun. Maybe I'll do some more tier lists in the future about like what are the best abilities in the game, or what are the best plug and play characters, or these tier lists can be fun to make. So but I'm gonna try to wrap this one up. We're getting a little bit long here, but I thought it'd be fun to do, and maybe this is helpful too, not just from a tier list perspective, but like characters that you're wondering where you want to spend your ability materials, and where I think they kind of fall in line where you should consider spending your epic materials. And I can tell you now, if you're a low spender or free-to-play player who has limited amount of epic materials, do not fear spending them on Elrond, Thorin, or Balin. All are absolute very good leadership abilities that you won't regret putting resources into. So anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.